Those brisk, clear and brisk. We'll get started in about a minute, maybe. To those that might be listening to the webinar or the seminar via the web, you've been muted during the talk, but at the end, as I understand it, you possibly may be able to talk. Our colleague will let you in on the phone lines or computer, however it works. Well, let's begin today's talk. I have the distinct honor of introducing our speaker today. I've had also the pleasure of working with Dr. Harvey Borovitz from the University of Pittsburgh for my career, 8 years. He has offered to give his plenary speech that he gave at the International Mechanical Engineering Conference and Exposition about a week ago in honor of Dr. Pai. I think Dr. Pai and Dr. Borovitz are people of the same heart and integrity. So it's a real pleasure to be able to take a little time and think about how important people are to us and the example that they live and lead, and how we as students and colleagues can walk in their footsteps and still sharing the same dreams that they have. So I know Dr. Borovitz, if you look on his website for introductory material, there's plenty. We could go on for days. This is his list of publications. It's 15 pages long, doubles both sides. There's literally hundreds of papers here, but what's good about this that I think is kind of, Dr. Borovitz is a bioengineer at heart, and as we talk about the impact of Dr. Pai and on engineering education, bioengineering in particular, if you look at Dr. Borovitz's early papers, and this goes back to the late 70s, but the titles of the papers are like Transport and Flow Phenomena and Microchannel Membrane Oxygenator, Pressure Flow Relationship and Dynamic Behavior, Prosthetic Heart Valves, Pressure Flow Relationships. So why I bring that up is that's the fundamentals of engineering. So if you look in his most recent papers, there are numerical methods in, I think, medicine training, medical training, how to get a product through the FDA. So over the years, he's taken this very fundamental nature that we learned in our college level days and has applied it to, and continues to apply it in growing expertise and growing accessibility to others to his knowledge and sharing. So we are in store for a great talk by really legendary spokesperson, but we are also blessed that he will be dedicating this talk to Dr. Devdas Pai's memory. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Sankar to close over. Thanks.
Thanks, Boyce. First of all, thank you all for being here. Let me look at it. November 14, okay, in Pittsburgh, we had an ASM, American Center of Mechanics. That's the largest get-together, and Borovitz gave the plenary talk, okay. And then there is another person, okay, by the name Dr. Subha Kumpati, who was the main person. He also organized another complete symposium on Devdas Pai for his contribution to middle school and high school students, okay. Now, lawyers, starting from this year, okay, every ASM, okay, annual conference, we are going to have Pai session on outreach, okay. So I want to tell ANT people, get ready to present paper on high school and everything. So every year starting 2018, it's going to continue. Okay. The second one is I want to make a couple of statements. A very strange thing related to every one of you are thinking about pi, how is affected, then what is it? In my case, it's a very strange thing. I think this guy is here. This is strange. I work in my office, okay? Right now, yes, last week, some project. I'm writing Ohio proposal. And my English is not that good. But this Devdas Pai is a Shakespeare in English. So I write something, I go to the other side, and he's not there. I come back to my office, okay? And then afterwards he's there, okay, doesn't matter, tomorrow. So I keep doing this. I keep doing it. I correct it and saying is not there, okay? I modify. Very strange thing, okay? But related to Dr. Borowitz, not only he, 2006, visiting Pi, all of us, not only he lost a friend, another 2 weeks, 3 weeks back, you remember the Pittsburgh temple? They're all, for 35 years, his closest friend. So he is going through some kind. So the question is, it's honoring Symposium, like what you told. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of education? Okay? Ask yourself. We are all riding on this. You are born, but the other side is decided. We don't know. It could be tomorrow, I may be hit by a car. But what am I going to do today? Because that's all I have. Think. Dr. Boden, thank you.
So I've been here many times to speak. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I've been here many times to speak. I never thought I would be making this kind of a presentation today about our beloved Dr. Pai. And putting this particular talk together, I actually thought Dr. Sankar should give the talk in Pittsburgh. Because there was a remarkable relationship between Dr. Sankar and Dr. Pai. But Dr. Sankar thought I should give the talk, and so I did. And so I'm going to give the exact same talk that I gave in Pittsburgh, even though some of the information here might be old news. It's not fake news, I can tell you that. It might be old news. But for the people who were in attendance in Pittsburgh, it was new news. So I thought I would just give verbatim the presentation and add a few comments along the way, of course. So Dr. Kompati and Dr. Sankar really organized this session in honor of Dr. Pai, who had quite a record of accomplishment in the ASME's professional activities. That such a session would be organized in his name. So the title of this talk, as you can see, is all about engineering education, which again is not what I do for a living. I'm not an engineering educator per se. There are such specialists across most universities nowadays. So there was a lot of background work to try to sort through the infinite amount of literature on this topic, at least from my perspective, and to put it in the perspective of Dr. Pai. So really, what I told the people in Pittsburgh is the focus here is on what did Dr. Pai accomplish. And really, Dr. Pai was an innovator. And really, Dr. Pai's approach to education and his aims for the ERC educational programs were years ahead of his time. They were literally years ahead of his time. When I was putting materials together and I was looking through the National Academy of Sciences, National Academies, I guess nowadays, literature, looking through the various journals, what Dr. Pai had proposed with Dr. Sankar in 2006 or 2007 is precisely what you hear about today when you look at those monographs. And hopefully I can make some of those points through today. So this is our dear friend, Dr. Pai. And of course, I told the people in Pittsburgh that there was no financial disclosure. That the only disclosure I had to make was just my admiration and just awe of who Dr. Pai was, the man that he was, for all of us. So I told him in Pittsburgh, this is what I really do for a living. And if you happen to are able to see the red circle, that's the last weekend in October of 1985. That was the first implant of the total artificial heart in a patient. And the patient is wearing the black t-shirt. And this really was the launching for me to participate in this field of mechanical circulatory support. So this is what I really do. And I could spend 20 lectures talking about that, but we were still able to utilize some of this particular application in the education of the students from this university with Dr. Pai's genius thoughts as always. So what would someone like me from a majority institution, why would I have any connections to North Carolina A&T, and why would I have the connections to Dr. Pai? And really, this figure taken from 2008, which was the NSF website announcement of ERC RMB, is really where this all began. And of course, I drew the red circle around Dr. Sankar because this was the first, formal mention of the awarding of this ERC. It was really, of course, we had been working on this prior to this announcement, naturally, but this was really the connection that I explained to the folks in Pittsburgh. Now, the founders of the ERC, of course, and Dr. Pai and Dr. Sankar and the late Dr. Rada were the cement, the glue that made this all possible. But what was interesting to the folks in Pittsburgh was the fact that Mike Lovell was also one of the founders. Why people were interested in that is that Mike Lovell is the president of Marquette University today. And there are very few ERCs where the founding member, one of the founding members, is the university president. And when we started this idea of collaborations between North Carolina A&T and the University of Pittsburgh, Dr. Lovell was just a young man. He was a working man, just like everybody here. He worked for a living. He wasn't a university president. And now you can show this slide and say that one of the founding fathers of this ERC, this marvelous ERC, is the university president at Marquette. So Dr. Pai had a vision, and this is a vision that was so far ahead of what others would have thought. And if you go to any of the monographs from the national academies and you look for a vision, none will be as profound and important as what is here. To train future engineers for industry, research, development, and a multidisciplinary environment that values diversity of thinking, innovation, and entrepreneurship. I mean, it's perfect. I don't know a better vision statement than what Dr. Pai wrote for Dr. Sankar in 2006 or 2007, whenever it was. And it's more important today what Dr. Pai wrote than it was 12 years ago, actually. And Dr. Pai's approach to education and outreach over the years follows these bullet points from development, creativity, collaboration, but it's the bottom two bullets. It's the bottom two bullets that I've italicized, because I think in today's world, these are the most important of all of Dr. Pai's approaches. To value everyone, to value everyone's contributions, and to make everyone feel welcome. I don't know anything that's more important anymore in what we do, whether it's in a laboratory, in a classroom, or anything. And Dr. Pai knew this. He knew this years ahead of what we know today. And so I italicized it. I don't know what else I could have done to highlight it. I guess I could have use different colors, but and you'll see when we look through the various monographs from the National Academies that these are the statements that you'll find in those monographs. So Dr. Pai also, Dr. Pai was a brilliant scientist. He was a gold medal winner in IIT, which meant that in his year, I think this is true, Dr. Sankar can correct me, he was the top student in the entire country of India. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The very top student in the entire country of India. I don't even know what that means, right? I was happy if I could get through some of my classes, let alone be the very brightest top student in an entire country. And so when Dr. Pai would put together these kinds of drawings, there was a lot of power in what was here, even though it's just a simple black and white drawing. It's so relevant because what Dr. Pai did is he put 4 pillars in the sand. And we're going to talk about community college, and it's very important nowadays. And Dr. Pai predated this by 12 years. And he had these arrows, everything linking to everyone else. So what are universities good for? Universities are good for training, teaching, and research opportunities. And university provides graduates to industry. And the community college provides graduates to the university. And the government oversees regulatory affairs for industry. And all this, and the funding, and all this Dr. Pai knew. Dr. Pai had this all figured out years ago. And because he understood all this, the incredible successes of the education program of the ERC occurred. I still don't quite understand how this all works, but it seems to work. With Dr. Pai, it all worked. For the rest of us, I'm not sure how well it works, but we keep trying anyhow. So Dr. Sankar was awarded the ERC in 2008, and 1 year later, Dr. Pai brought a caravan of faculty and students to Pittsburgh, where we were hosting the 2009 annual meeting of the Biomedical Engineering Society. And it was really a great, I think, way to introduce many of the faculty and students here who weren't really familiar with all the opportunities associated with bioengineering, biomedical engineering, to what is really available in the field through a meeting that has 3,000 or 4,000 participants. So from day one, Dr. Pai, and I never quite knew how this all happened. I think it was all because of Lois. All these people somehow made it to Pittsburgh. I don't know how. They seem to get back in one piece. I'm never quite sure how this happened because every time I try to come down here, there's at least 2 flight cancellations. And somehow or another, Dr. Pai was able to make this happen. And now, to my way of thinking, what was accomplished with Dr. Pai and then with Dr. Nicely together in terms of introducing biomedical engineering, bioengineering to this institution, such that in every conceivable way, North Carolina A&T as an HBCU was at the lead. Was at the lead at the undergraduate level, was at the lead at the master's level. And the bottom line was that in such a short period of time, North Carolina A&T was a member of the bioengineering fraternity and a highly respected member of that fraternity, or sorority, depending on what you want to call it. And if you just look at the timeline, folks, this is so impressive to me. If you start with the award, the official award of the ERC was in September 2008, and within 8 years, I mean, Dr. Pai came to Pittsburgh with BMES in 2009. With a handful of years, you now have an ABET accredited program down here. It's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable that this could be accomplished in such a short period of time. And again, this doesn't happen if Dr. Pai isn't leading the charge. That's just how it is. And all these are just reminders of all the accomplishments that came with Dr. Pai. These are some of Dr. Sankar's slides. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because Dr. Sankar's lectured often here on campus, but I showed these slides in Pittsburgh to make the point that not only were the numbers of students participating in bioengineering down here sizable, and this is not a university that is with an enormous endowment that can afford to support so many students. But somehow these students came here, they were educated here, and they went on to have wonderful careers, and I'll give some examples of that. And to me, these are numbers that are staggering, quite frankly, in the last few years. When you look at the number of BS and MS students here, in an institution, again, without a very large endowment compared to the Northeastern universities and the West Coast universities, and you look at the accomplishments that this school has accomplished with diversity and inclusion, what every school wants to accomplish. Every school in the Northeast, Harvard, I'm happy to say Pitt is the same as Harvard. Harvard, Pittsburgh, and everybody else want to accomplish these kind of numbers. You've accomplished them here. And again, what I simply said from this slide from Dr. Sankar is, as far as the culture of inclusion, the impact here far exceeds any national statistics. It's just truly so impressive. But to me, of all the things that Dr. Pai did, this to me was the most impressive, because these are just a few of the photographs of Dr. Pai's outreach programs. And I don't know how he did it. I simply do not know how he does it. He went to these schools and he went everywhere, and he was inundating all these young people, etc. And he excited all of them. And not only did he start with third graders, I mean, third graders, I'm trying to remember when my kids were in third grade. I can't seem to remember. I don't think they were driving in those days, though, so that was good. So I'm thinking of the positives. But these are the students that Dr. Pai reached out to. And not only did he reach out to these very young students, he also made a point to have a huge impact at the high school level. So literally, I think it's true for Dr. Pai from pre-K all the way through 12, or whatever it's called, high school senior. Dr. Pai was reaching out and exposing students who would never see the kinds of science and STEM opportunities. Dr. Pai made that possible for these kids. Just, to me, it's remarkable. It's truly remarkable. And this is reflected in the REU programs that were in Dr. Sankar's ERC over the years. And you could just read for yourself. Students came here from all over the place, right? Students came, and again, I'm talking about people coming here, there's no endowment to support this, right? The dean isn't just throwing money out every year to bring all these students from all over the country. It happened somehow, right? 14 states, 29 total institutions. And you can see diversity and inclusion, again, just spectacular. Dr. Pai launched the so-called summer camp concept down here. At least it was a new concept for me. And you can see here, this is in the IRC building. I think it's the 4th floor, and it's packed to the rafters with people. This is summer camp, right? When we used to send our kids to summer camp, I was glad to get rid of them for a while. The last thing I wanted to do was hang out with them. I was glad to have a little peace and quiet. Look at this summer camp. It's packed with people. It's packed with people. And there's Dr. Pai standing over to the side, letting everybody else, the young people, speak and to introduce whatever the topics were for this particular session. So we go back again to Dr. Pai's education and outreach vision, and I showed examples. These previous slides, I showed examples of how this just wasn't a vision for a nice slide to present. This was a vision that allowed action to occur. From preschool through ABET accreditation of a bioengineering degree at the bachelor's and master's level, and even higher, and even beyond that. So one of the things that Dr. Pai did is he realized that at least one thing we can do in Pittsburgh is to utilize the clinical facilities we have at our disposal. And in Pittsburgh, as many of you know, our engineering school is literally a fastball pitch away from the medical center. So we have the opportunity to get our students into the clinic and whatnot. And so this write-up, Dr. Nicely wrote this up and offered it to several classes of students. I think we've had 3 classes of students, again, that have this opportunity to learn about a topic that's not generally available here, but made available through these concepts. Again, all part of Dr. Pai's vision. And what we were able to do on one of the visits is a number of the North Carolina A&T students were actually able to go visit the hospitals. They were literally able to go into the clinic and actually see what was going on. And not just from a board lecture, they were actually able to go into this clinic and touch the equipment and see how it works and see what's, from an engineering point, is good about it or what needs to be improved about it. And so, again, a vision for education and inclusion that Dr. Pai brought to all of us. And as I mentioned, we start with the pre-K students that Dr. Pai impacted. Now we go all the way through to the PhD students who Dr. Pai impacted. And both of these, Dr. Mao and Dr. Mahoney, had degrees from this institution. Dr. Mao and Dr. Mahoney had bachelor's and master's degrees at this institution. Dr. Pai sent them to Pittsburgh, and they completed their PhD. Dr. Mao is now working in industry. Dr. Mahoney is now a postdoctoral fellow. So Dr. Pai started pre-K, and he took it all the way through the PhD. I don't know if educators should do this sort of thing. It's 10 times beyond my capabilities to do that. But somehow Dr. Pai was able to do all of it. So through Dr. Pai, we started our own camp BioE, it's called. It began with ERC, of course, and we were able to host upwards of 100 campers and provide support. We're a little bit different from a financial standpoint in Pittsburgh than here, and so we had some more resources at our disposal that I think made a difference. So I don't know how I play this movie. Let's see. I think I just click on it.
There's a problem in today's education system. Schools can't provide their students with enough science, technology, engineering, and math, also known as STEM. In underfunded schools, which often have a higher minority population, students may receive even less STEM education than others.
Our goal was to try to change that demographic, even if it's one student at a time.
Our vision is that the field of STEM should reflect the population in every way, shape, or form.
Camp BioE is an effort by PITT's Department of Bioengineering, and our goal is to show all students that STEM can be fun and exciting.
We provide a unique opportunity for kids to have an exposure to bioengineering, which is a very multidisciplinary field that allows kids to see how physics, mathematics, biology, all these kind of areas of science that are included under the STEM umbrella are important in solving problems that affect humanity.
Camp BioE goes beyond the traditional classroom experience.
In the regular classroom, you just sit at your desk, listen to a lecture, learn the textbook, do a worksheet. But here it was very hands-on and interactive when we got to see the stuff for ourselves.
Like differentiating stem cells and developing mind-controlled prosthetics.
I think the information is sticking with me better here than like probably when I go to 10th grade and learn just all these vocab words just like that.
It was neat to see the process of having kids have fun while putting them right at the leading edge of science and engineering. and to do that in a week.
The campers aren't the only ones who benefit from Camp BioE. PITT undergraduates in the Department of Bioengineering take on the role of near-peer mentors and counselors. Prior to the camp, they spend 6 weeks developing activities and creating the curriculum.
Counseling has been enormously beneficial to me personally. It's provided me the opportunity to teach and give students the hands-on experiences they need to really kindle their interest.
I've always been a sort of introvert, and this has helped me grow out of that shell and become a leader.
A lot of counselors say the biggest reward comes from the students.
When they see something really cool, you see that surprise, really enlightened look on their face, and they can't stop smiling, which is a really cool feeling.
Parents are noticing the same thing.
This is something that really sparked interest. We really found he's been able to really share or express himself in an environment where he's truly accepted and he's around other people. You know, we have the same passion and he does.
Camp BioE wants to act as an affordable resource for today's youth to learn, flourish, and ultimately gain the confidence to become the next bioengineer.
It's fun and it's complicated and it can be confusing at times, but you learn so much and it just makes it all worth it.
So, all this, of course, began with Dr. Pai, and now with this background, we were able in Pittsburgh to grab 2 NSF grants, one at the graduate level and one at the undergraduate level. The STRIVE program is at the graduate level. Its goal is, first and foremost, improve faculty engagement with URM students, underrepresented minority students. Again, this is one of the visions of Dr. Pai. And improve faculty awareness of the problems facing underrepresented minority students. And folks, whatever challenges I faced as a graduate student, underrepresented students face even more challenges. And trying to reach out and help these young people address these challenges is something Dr. Pai knew years ago, and something this grant is hoping to address, at least at the University of Pittsburgh. And so the goal here is to produce PhDs like Dr. Mao and Dr. Mahoney, who will go back and give their own outreach and strengthen the network for underrepresented minorities to participate in STEM. So this is one program at the graduate level. Then at the undergraduate level, there's another program called GEPS, Global Engineering Preparedness Scholarship. Again, this is all work begun with Dr. Suvenis Wosu, who was part of the ERC here for a number of years, Dr. Stephen Abramowitz, you saw him in a previous film, and the two of them are just taking the vision from Dr. Pai and doing great things in Pittsburgh. And the goal here is to get those students from underrepresented populations to have opportunities to be recruited, retained, and graduate in a STEM program. And prepare these students for the global marketplace, because that's the reality for all of our students, for all of us, that there are no barriers anymore to anything. And so what Dr. Abramowitz has done is to develop a new course. It has to do with global device development, global marketing, global education, where the programs that PITT are involved in, the students go to South Africa in a totally different community, a totally different setting, and try to apply the skills that they've learned with us in this environment. So it's just a wonderful experience because it's a real experience. And what makes it most real is I don't go on the trip. So this is what I presented as far as the ERC and everything that's come of it. The rest of the talk really is looking at Dr. Pai's vision from the point of view of engineering education. And most of the data I'll be presenting comes either from National Academies monographs or ASCE documents. And this is one from the Data Bytes that basically shows the growth of mechanical engineering and biomedical engineering. And both have had significant growth. I think in this slide, mechanical engineering had grown by 117% over 15 years. Bioengineering had grown by some 300%. It's interesting if you go further and you look at this by race, gender, and ethnicity, et cetera, and you actually see what the goal here is to strive for inclusion, right? Inclusion of women in our professions, underrepresented students in our professions. And ASEE maintains all these statistics, and I was able to present them in Pittsburgh. One of the interesting findings from one of the monographs has to do with the trading that students face depending upon their financial circumstances. And this particular article about K through 12 education talked about the challenges that students face who have less financial means than many others. And that's captured really in this graph. What this graph says is if you look at basic courses like algebra or biology, what you see is that whether you come from a school with significant poverty or very little poverty, those kind of basic biology class or basic algebra class is going to be taught. But if you look at the true college preparatory courses, we want all of our students to have when they come to us, in calculus, in physics, you'll see a big difference between the numbers of students who are exposed to calculus and physics in impoverished districts compared to in districts that are not impoverished. So the students who we're trying to help face challenges just from the reality of the education they received prior to joining us in our colleges. Now, Dr. Pai was a visionary with community colleges, but according to some of the literature, this is the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center, 30% of all undergrads get their first education at community colleges. And I really had no idea that the number was that high. I truly had no idea that the number was that high. But that is an enormous impact on us as educators. If 30% of our classes are going to be from students who've had 1 or 2 years of community college, that's truly going to impact what we teach and how we teach. And the interesting thing is that while these kids who say they're going to do their community college and then they're going to go earn a 4-year degree, only a small fraction of them actually do. So you see the problems already of retention. All these problems creep up. All these problems become apparent. So this was one of the monographs from the National Academies on advancing systemic change in undergraduate and STEM education. And there were several workshop takeaways, thinking broadly about STEM education, interconnections between societal change and STEM education, and how do you strategize for changing undergraduate STEM education. So these are enormous topics. And I can't possibly go into everything here, but there are 2 key factors, and I have a red asterisk there. And one of the key factors says, what are the critical changes that undergraduate STEM education must take into account? And how can higher education meet the needs of STEM learners from diverse backgrounds and preparations? So these slides, folks, are taken directly from the monographs, so I didn't reprint them or anything, so this is all directly from the monographs. So these are 2 key factors, enormous factors. Dr. Pai was thinking about these factors a dozen years ago. So maybe one of the answers is we're not very good teachers. I mean, you find this in a Nature article that says better teachers are needed. And I don't think any one of us in this room who teaches would disagree with the fact that we can teach better. I don't think there's any one of us who can't look at our teaching critically and say, you know, we could do this better or that better. But I don't think this is what is meant here. And I think when we talk about teaching better, I don't think it's what we generally think about our teaching. And as we go through the rest of this talk, maybe I can tie that better into what's going on. So ASCE talked about, and I was surprised to see this as I went through these various monographs over time. And it basically says that Howard Hughes Medical Institute gives Framingham State a grant to launch programs to support STEM students. And I'm going to show lots of these kind of things, right? Where you see now money's being invested on behalf of STEM education. So when you think about investments by Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, biomedical philanthropic organization in the country, making a contribution for STEM education, you would not think it would go to Framingham State College, right? That would certainly not be your top choice for an organization to receive an award like this. Yet, it was. And so, again, it gives further idea and credence into how society is thinking about these problems now. Now, Pittsburgh, for whatever reason, has been a frequent site for National Society of Black Engineer meetings. Maybe it's because it's rather inexpensive in comparison to San Francisco or New York City, and especially in New York City, now that Amazon is moving in, you probably can't even afford to get a donut there or something. I don't know what's going to happen. But basically, the NSBE said that their goal is to graduate 10,000 black engineers by 2025. 10,000 black engineers by 2025. Today, or in 2014, there's 3,500. So the goal is to graduate 6,500 additional black engineers within a 10-year period. How does that happen? What do we have to do to make something like this happen? And whatever those answers are, it's going to have an enormous impact on how we educate and how we teach. Universities nowadays try to do surveys of students to be able to assess, did you get a good education when all is said and done? We do this for all our ABET accreditations, of course, but the universities are looking at this even more globally. And one, at least from Pittsburgh, one benchmark that all students who were surveyed, regardless of whatever their discipline happened to be, was they emphasized the importance of mentoring. These undergraduate students, it didn't matter whether they were in social sciences, humanities, STEM, they emphasized the importance of mentors in their undergraduate education. So again, another monograph, and I think this is actually an ERC monograph. Dr. Pai may well have participated in writing. I didn't go through all the pages of it. But if you look at recruiting students and retaining them, according to this monograph, 7% of bachelor degrees are earned by African Americans, and women earn fewer than 1 in 4. And even more concerning is that women and people of color are more likely not to be retained, not to graduate. Now you add that 30% factor for community colleges, and there's quite a challenge. So this particular monograph asks several questions. What works and why? How do we get these kids to college to begin with? How do we transition them to university, to college? And if we get them to college, how do we get them to STEM? How do we get them to transition to an engineering major? And finally, if we get them into the university and we get them to an engineering major, how do we graduate them and get them on their way for a professional career? And basically, you see that street sign has all sorts of pathways every which way. You need to transition to college, transition to a major, and transition to the workplace or some further education. And there are all sorts of on-ramps to transition these kids to college, get them to select a major in engineering, and select them and transition to the workplace. That's what we try to do as educators. But how do we do it in the previous slide with all these challenges? How do we do this today? And so another National Academy Press monograph entitled Barriers and Opportunities for 2-Year and 4-Year STEM Degrees. So what are these barriers and what are these opportunities that will allow us to transition these students to college, to engineering, and to their professional career and industry or other opportunities? So the question of this particular study, why do so many students who enter higher education interested in STEM lose interest? Right? I'm sure at this institution, the dean is very worried about retention. And I'm sure the chancellor here is very worried about retention, because we certainly are in Pittsburgh, and everyone's worried about retention. But the question is that this National Academy program is looking into is, why do they lose interest? What can we do to stop that from occurring? And there are lots and lots of conclusions. There are lots and lots of conclusions. I couldn't possibly go through all of them, so I put an asterisk around one of them, which is, for me, an eye-opener, because I'm from prehistoric times. Okay? Prehistoric times mean I went to class, I went to the library, and studied all the time. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. Now, I don't even think there are libraries anymore. Or they're all online libraries. I don't even know what a library is anymore, for the life of me. But this is the reality, that science, technology, engineering, STEM aspirants, they navigate their education in new and complex ways. That's it. We cannot, the Borbitz method of go to class, go to the lab, go to the library, wake up the next day, keep doing it, it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't happen anymore. In my day, everyone would graduate in 4 years. In my day, everyone would graduate in 4 years. Today, that's not true. You have so many different patterns here, mobility, and so many other things that impact the undergraduate education of our students. How do we accommodate? How do we account for this? These are the types of questions that we need Dr. Pai to help us address. And another conclusion is, not surprisingly, there is not a single approach that's going to improve all the education outcomes. There's going to require a series of interconnected and evidence-based approaches to help achieve student success. So there's not one simple answer, and the answer that will work here will certainly be worthwhile to consider in Pittsburgh, but it probably won't be the be-all end-all in Pittsburgh. So it's uniquely to the organization, its structure itself, as well as all these challenges that I'm pointing out. So at the end of the day, we're talking about education, right? We're talking about trying to get these kids into our universities. We want them to translate to a STEM major. We want to graduate them. We want them to have great professional careers. And yet this is so complicated in today's world when retention is such an issue, when finances are such a concern, when 30% of our students will be junior college, community college, or whatever moving forward. But at the end of the day, we cannot forget, how do students learn? And are we teaching in such a way to optimize the learning of our students? And again, this, another National Academies document, and I'm proud to say, in all my years of education, I never took a single course in educational psychology. So if there's somebody who knows absolutely nothing about this topic, you're looking at them. But nonetheless, it's clear that our education has to account for the way students learn. Not the way I learned, the way students learn today. And there are endless documents and references and whatnot, but I just put asterisks about several of them, which says that all sorts of research has emerged that focus on the study of learning from birth through adulthood in both formal and informal settings. And so you take that type of research by the experts who generate this sort of information and try to assimilate it in such a way that it's relevant to us, to those of us who try to educate students in STEM. And so again, endless numbers of conclusions. This is an example of one of them. That each learner develops a unique array of knowledge and cognitive resources in the course of life. But that education is not simply what we teach them on the blackboard or the whiteboard, but it's molded by that student's cultural, social, cognitive, and biological context. So it's not in a vacuum. You walk into the classroom and everything about the rest of your life all of a sudden isn't like severed. And to teach like that is not optimal anymore. So if you look at some of the conclusions, so again, following up on 3.1, the individual learner constantly integrates many types of learning in response to the challenges and circumstances he or she encounters. Okay? So learning is integration, and that's what we want our students to do, of course. We want them to integrate their life's lessons and their technical lessons in a way that is productive for their innovation and creative qualities. The motivation to learn is extremely important. And the goal here, to learn intentionally, people must want to learn. Folks, I have endless examples of proving that browbeating fails all the time. If you try to browbeat anybody, you'll get hit over the head with something or other, and it will never work. It will absolutely never work. If you want students to learn, they have to want to learn. You can't force them to learn. And this is a very important, finding. Maybe it's intuitive, but I go to the bottom asterisk, and I refer you back to Dr. Pai's visions, because the bottom asterisk says that in order to support learning, you have to create an emotionally supportive and non-threatening learning environment where learners feel safe and valued. This is what Dr. Pai said. This was Dr. Pai's vision a dozen years ago. And here I'm quoting from the National Academies, and they're saying the exact same thing. They're saying the exact same thing. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for us as educators? And of course, you're all welcome to disagree with everything I say, right? That's the beauty of these talks. You can disagree, you can say Forbes is so old, he doesn't know anything, and I'll agree with that. I absolutely agree. But from my perspective in going through this information, I have this red box which says, understanding the cultural nature of learning and development means that what takes place in every classroom, the learning environment, the influence of educators, and all students' experience of school cannot be fully understood without attention to cultural influences. So what that means, folks, is that when I submit a syllabus, day one happens, at least in my little corner of the world, and higher headquarters will always want to see my syllabus. So I put some useless stuff on a piece of paper to satisfy higher headquarters, and I completely ignore this. I completely ignore this. Because I don't know who these students are. I don't know their backgrounds. I don't know their ambitions. I don't know anything that would address what this National Academy conclusion is. And if you believe this, then how we even begin teaching our classes would have to be dramatically changed. So a summary from this particular proceedings in the National Academy says that attention to both individual factors, such as developmental stage, physical, emotional, mental health, and interests and motivations, as well as factors external to the individual, such as the environment in which a learner is situated, social, cultural context, and opportunities available to learners, is necessary to develop a complete picture of the nature of learning. And this particular year, and this concept has reached NSF in an interesting way, actually. So this particular year, they asked me to serve, to review, NSF asked me to review some student-related awards. And one of the criterion that NSF wants me to consider, all the reviewers, is how has the student taken advantage of the opportunities available to him or her? So a student who's applying for this, who comes from the Northeast, is an undergraduate student at MIT, has infinite resources available. How is that student taking advantage of those resources? Or a student who comes from a smaller school, a school that doesn't have the kind of MIT imprimatur. What has that student done with the opportunities available to him or her? So what is on the horizon? And you know, when I was putting this together, it was bitter cold in Pittsburgh. It's always bitter cold in Pittsburgh. People here think it's chilly today. I haven't been so warm in weeks. I mean, this is great. Looking for the nearest swimming pool or something. So this is not a horizon taken from Pittsburgh, I can assure you. So looking at the Capitol short, I'll read what's asterisk here, which I think is pretty important actually. That the issue of STEM has reached the White House, and that at a recent meeting, it was published in the U.S. News and World Report about STEM education in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. One of the points that was raised was federal level and efforts to increase participation of underrepresented groups in STEM fields. So if this concept is reaching the White House, then in the best of all possible worlds, funding will be made available to help that occur. So I personally think this is a very positive outcome to see what we're discussing, making it all the way to the White House policy office. Another thing you see is supporting minority STEM programs. And throughout all these ASEE First Bells, you saw NSF and other organizations providing millions of dollars actually to enhance STEM education opportunities for minority programs, which I think is very exciting. And this is not something I saw, this was what, September 25th. This is not something I just saw September 25th and 6 months earlier I saw another one. I see these on a weekly basis where places like Framingham State University, right? The Howard Hughes Medical Institute, or this one, where is this one? In Kansas. You know, these are schools where you would think that millions of dollars would be invested in STEM education and minority programs. But you see that there is an impact here. There is an impact, and it seems to be far-reaching, actually, moving forward. And finally, here's another example. NSF selects 3 universities. There's 3 universities here. Let me see where. The University of Memphis, University of Colorado, Denver, and this is Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Again, they're going to collaborate on STEM programs. And they were awarded, what, $5 million from the NSF to do this. So from my perspective, NSF is making real investments in places you would not expect this money to be going, quite frankly, to try to address these issues of STEM and inclusion and how we better educate our students for the future, which is exactly what Dr. Pai wanted to do. And so I come back to Dr. Pai's vision statement again, and Dr. Sankar's image of all of us in one of the site visits, I forget which year this was, showing how we started at this ERC because Dr. Pai had such a vision and realized everything I discussed today, everything that's come out of these National Academy proceedings, really is all embodied in this vision statement. Dr. Pai knew that he could sense, I don't know how he did, but he knew that this was going to be the future. He prepared all of us to think about how we can address these problems moving forward. So with that, I thank you for your attention.
So somebody might need to go, it's 12 o'clock, but we have time for a couple questions or comments. Thank you, Dr. Horowitz. It was really a great insight into our impact, the vision, and I think it will continue. Like there's guidance here for us to apply to our lives. All right, sir. Well, let's thank Dr. Horowitz again. Celebrate Dr. Pai. Let's go out there and live his dream and our dreams too, and understand. So.